He was dismissed in his lifetime as a madman, an engraver, a poet, a painter, whose visions of angels, demons, and fiery gods were unlike anything England had seen before. He lived in poverty, misunderstood by most of his contemporaries, and yet today he's celebrated as one of the greatest figures of Romanticism, an artist whose imagination reshaped how we see art, literature, and even spirituality. This is the story of William Blake, the visionary who refused to separate art from life. Hey guys, it's Laura here again. Welcome back to the channel and let's dive in. William Blake was born in London in 1757 into a working class family with strong nonconformist religious beliefs. His father was a hosier and money was tight, but Blake's imagination was limitless. As a boy, he reported seeing visions, angels in trees, prophets in the streets, even God himself looking in at his window. Blake first studied art at the Drawing Academy of Henry Pars, before apprenticing at 14 to the engraver James Bazire. Bazire sent him to sketch Gothic monuments in Westminster Abbey, an experience that sparked Blake's lifelong love of medieval and Renaissance art. He devoured the work of Michelangelo, Raphael, and Dürer, seeking to create what he called Gothic art, timeless, spiritual, infused with poetic genius. At 22, he entered the Royal Academy schools as an engraver, but the Royal Academy's classical ideals clashed with his belief that true art came not from copying antiquity, but from visions and imagination. In 1782, Blake married Catherine Boucher, the daughter of a poor grocer. She couldn't read or write at the time, but Blake taught her, and she became not only his wife, but his studio assistant and lifelong collaborator. Catherine would hand-colour prints, help bind books, and remain devoted to his visionary mission. 2 years later, Blake briefly opened a print shop with a fellow apprentice, James Parker. Before striking out on his own, his engraving career provided a living, but it was his experiments in the wake of tragedy that changed everything. In 1787, Blake's beloved younger brother Robert died, probably of tuberculosis. Blake was devastated, but soon after, he claimed Robert appeared to him in a vision, revealing a new method of printmaking: relief etching. This technique allowed Blake to etch both text and image onto a single copper plate, then hand-colour the prints, bind them and sell them. The result was the illuminated book, a form that gave him total control as both poet and artist. The illuminated books tackled huge themes. Among these works is Songs of Innocence and Experience, perhaps his most famous creation. On the surface, it's a collection of children's verses, but in Blake's hands, it becomes a profound study of human existence. Innocence depicts a world of joy, purity, and divine order, but in Experience, innocence is corrupted by poverty, cruelty, and oppression. Poems like The Chimney Sweeper and The Tiger reveal Blake's genius for compressing vast moral and spiritual struggles into a handful of unforgettable lines, accompanied by luminous, unsettling images. These illuminated books tackled poverty, child exploitation, tyranny, religious hypocrisy, and racial inequality. They were radical for their time, a union of biting social critique and mystical, mythic imagery. Blake didn't illustrate existing myths, he created his own universe of characters. Urizen, the cold god of law and reason. Orc, the fiery spirit of rebellion. Laurs, the eternal prophet and artist. Through them, he explored the eternal struggles between imagination and oppression, freedom and control, innocence and corruption. One of his most enduring images is the Ancient of Days, a bearded godlike figure measuring the universe with a compass. This image, drawn from Blake's mythology, shows Urizen as a false creator, a god of reason and law, limiting the boundless energy of imagination. It's both beautiful and terrifying, a symbol of the conflict Blake saw between divine inspiration and human-made systems of control. Despite his radical independence, Blake did attract loyal patrons. Chief among them was Thomas Butts, a Swedenborgian civil servant who supported Blake for a decade. Butts commissioned around 50 tempera paintings and more than 80 watercolors, following on biblical themes from the Old Testament, the life of Christ and Revelation. At the same time, Blake experimented with large-scale color prints in the 1790s, which he described as frescoes. These monumental works included iconic images such as Newton, where the greatest scientist sits naked on a rock, bent over a compass absorbed in measurement. For Blake, Newton symbolized materialist science, brilliant but blind to imagination and the spiritual world. These prints, inspired by Shakespeare, Milton, and the Bible, remain amongst his most ambitious visual achievements. Blake lived most of his life in London, venturing out only briefly to the southern coast of England from 1800 to 1803, where he worked for the poet William Hayley in Feltham, but even then he longed to return to the city. In his later years, he created some of his most profound works. His illustrations of the Book of Job, a series of 22 engravings, are now considered masterpieces. In them, Blake reimagines Job's suffering not as punishment, but as a journey towards spiritual awakening. His stark, dramatic compositions combine biblical faith with his own mystical vision, elevating the story into a universal tale of redemption. He also produced a set of haunting watercolors for Dante's Divine Comedy. In these works, Blake explored themes of sin, redemption, and divine love, but also through his own lens, often challenging Dante's orthodox morality. And then there's The Ghost of a Flea, one of his strangest and most unforgettable paintings. According to Blake, the image came to him in a vision, a monstrous, vampiric creature, part human, part insect. In it, we glimpse Blake's fascination with the darker corners of the imagination, where grotesque forms embody spiritual truths. During his lifetime, Blake was dismissed by many as eccentric or insane. His books didn't sell widely, he was often poor, surviving on small commissions. Yet he and Catherine pressed on, driven by visions that no ridicule could shake. Blake died in 1827, singing hymns as Catherine sat at his side. Only a small group attended his funeral. But Blake's reputation grew after his death. The Romantics admired his originality. The Pre-Raphaelites admired him in the mid-19th century, seeing him as a kindred spirit who rejected convention. By the 20th century, he was recognized not as a madman, but as a genius, a visionary who anticipated modern art, graphic design, and even popular culture. From musicians like Patti Smith and Bob Dylan to writers like Aldous Huxley and Philip Pullman, Blake's influence is everywhere. His lines, like "to see a world in a grain of sand," still resonate today. William Blake is remembered as a revolutionary artist and poet whose work continues to inspire across art, literature, music, and beyond. William Blake lived on the margins, poor, misunderstood, often dismissed. But he never wavered. For him, art was prophecy, a way of seeing the truth of the world with the mind's eye. His legacy reminds us that imagination isn't an escape from reality, it's a way of transforming it. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed learning more about William Blake's visionary world. Let me know in the comments which artist or designer you'd like me to cover next. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. See you on the next one. Bye!